Okay, so my name is Jekaterina Novikova. I'm a director of machine learning at Winterlight Labs. But today I'm not going to speak about the work we're doing at Winterlight. Instead, I will speak about the work on dialogue systems and the conversational AI that I was doing in a collaboration with my colleagues at the Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh in the UK. So is your dialogue system good enough? And what are the methods that allow answering this question? That's the topic of my today's talk. So I gave you a great overview of the history of conversational AI earlier today. And on top of that, I want to give you some type of a structure of the types of dialogue systems. So there are different types of dialogue systems available to users like you and me. And I believe most of you are familiar with at least several types of those. So dialogue systems could be differentiated based on the platform that they are deployed on. And as such, they could be virtual dialogue systems, such as, for example, chatbots or virtual assistants that provide you with some information about products or services. Or, for example, Siri is another example of a virtual dialogue system. On the other hand, dialogue systems could be physical as well, as, for example, Amazon Alexa, or this cute robot that you see here in the picture. That's a Pepper robot, and I'm going to speak briefly about dialogue system on that robot today as well. And the second group of types of dialogue systems is based on the purpose of the dialogue. And in terms of purpose, dialogues could be task-oriented or conversational. Most systems that exist in the market nowadays are task-oriented. This means that they were designed with some specific purpose in mind. For example, help users find the nearby restaurant, or book flights or hotels, or answer technical support questions. Conversational systems, however, they are becoming more and more popular nowadays too. People like a lot just chatting to the chatbots about unspecified topics, and some developers and companies are now positioning their chatbots as a so-called virtual AI-based friend, rather than a source of some specific information. And today I'll quickly touch all of these types of systems when speaking about the evaluation methods. So why is it important to properly evaluate dialogue systems? That's because this is how the system can be debugged and improved. And differently from any other type of software, it is extremely difficult to foresee what is going to happen during a real life dialogue with a real person. So as a result, as you can see in these examples on the screen, your dialogue system can become, for example, extremely boring, even if you thought of many different ways to deal with unclear situations, such as in the left picture. So technically, that chatbot on the left, that system is doing great because its answers are diverse, they are not repetitive, they are answering, they have real answers to those questions that person is asking. But in practice, there is nothing to speak about with such a chatbot that cannot give you information that you want. And they do not know answers to any of your questions that you ask. In the middle picture is an example of how a chatbot is ignoring the context of the conversation. And this usually happens because chatbot developers just assume that the dialogue would go the way that they designed it to be. And as a result, you can see that the chatbot reacts with the happy response to the fact that the user, nothing good happened to the user today, and that's a therapeutic chatbot, so it's not good, obviously. And the right one shows how useless could be the system if it does not properly understand what the person means. So I don't think that anyone thinks that note of that as Siri saved it in this picture is of a great use. So how to evaluate the quality of dialogues? There are 3 standard metrics that I will speak about, and those all 3 are frequently in real-life dialogue systems, and those are appropriateness of systems response, duration of conversation, and human feedback. Obviously, those 3 metrics are not the only ones, but they are used frequently in practice. And I will try to explain what is the motivation behind each of those, how they should work, and how they sometimes fail, unfortunately. So appropriateness of response, that's a very frequent metric. Very often in the academic research and in the industrial applications, systems are compared to each other based on the metrics like BLUE or Meteor, and the motivation behind that metric is that we want to compare the system response to some ground truth reference that is generated by a person. So the motivation is that if the system's response is closely similar to what a person would say in such a situation, then it means that it's a good response. And if the system's response is completely different and dissimilar, that's a sign of a bad system response. And the metrics used for this purpose, they are called word overlap metrics, BLUE, Meteor, and several others. These metrics initially were invented for the purpose of evaluation of machine translation systems, but they're used for dialogue systems as well. And to give you a brief overview, they calculate the amount of words in both a system-generated sentence and the person-produced ground truth sentence that overlap. And in the example that you see on the slide, if the ground truth is, "I'm glad to see you here," for example, the sentence, "glad to see you," would have a high BLUE score because all its words overlap with the ground truth. "Happy to see you here," the second sentence, would also get a high enough score because 4 words out of 5 overlap with the ground truth. So everything sounds easy and completely proper, but what can possibly go wrong here? And here is what can go wrong. Imagine the conversation where a person asks which restaurant nearby has internet. And the dialogue system is evaluated on the ground truth reference that sounds like the Donatello has internet. That's the ground truth. However, the actual system response is, well, there is a restaurant with internet access called the Donatello. That's actually the meaning is the same, and I would personally even say that the system's actual response is way more natural and of a higher quality than the ground truth. Or at the very least, both responses are equally good. However, the BLUE score in such a situation would be very low because just 3 out of 11 words overlap with the ground truth. And some time ago, we did a study that we have published at the EMNLP conference where we have compared many different word overlap metrics with human judgments on different data sets of dialogues and different metrics. And we realized that scores produced by the word overlap metrics, they do not correlate with human judgments at all. As you can see in the slide, in the table, the highest correlation with the human judgments does not even reach a 10% level. So it's an extremely low correlation between blue-like metrics and human judgments. Okay, next standard metric is evaluation. Next standard metric of evaluation is time. And the motivation here is also quite obvious, especially if we focus on conversational type of systems, or otherwise known as chit-chat systems. So you may think the longer is the dialogue, the more engaged is a person speaking to the system. And that's a good sign that should show a high quality of the dialogue, right? So longer dialogues sound much nicer than a formal exchange of just the necessary information. And even if we speak about a task-oriented dialogue, we usually think that longer dialogues are better in general. So in real life, however, things are not always that obvious, unfortunately. And here are the examples. So these are the real dialogues that we have collected during the study with the Pepper robot that you've seen on the first slide. And the robot in the study was trying to play a role of a direction-giving robot that knows everything about how to go to any shop nearby. So on the left, the system misunderstood the user first, and due to this replied using some predefined response that was supposed to be useful for a small talk. And that was a strategy designed in a chatbot. However, this response of a system was so out of context that user was completely confused and said that he did not understand. That was identified by a system again as a clarification request, which was properly addressed. And as you can imagine, such a dialogue as on the left could go on and on and on, with the user becoming just more and more confused by such a system. And obviously there is nothing good or useful in such a dialogue. But if we evaluate it based on the duration, it would get a high score because it was long. And on the right, another example of the system that could not understand the person due to some technical speech recognition issues. And so the person tried to rephrase the exactly same question again and again in order to make it more understandable by the robot. And this dialogue also took quite a while, although it was completely useless as well. The next metric is a human feedback. And human feedback is considered to be one of the best possible metrics. And the motivation here is simple again. The motivation sounds like this. If we develop conversational systems for people, then people should be the ones who evaluate them. And in order to get human feedback, developers either collect the scores by asking people to evaluate the complete dialogues, or sometimes even ask for a feedback during the dialogue after a system's response. So here in the picture, you can see the example of how a chatbot is asking for a feedback. So these thumbs up and down, that's how the feedback is collected. After collecting such a feedback, what is usually done, developers usually retrain the whole system. So in the next dialogues, the system generates responses that are presumably more appealing to users. That's the goal. So what can go wrong with such a metric? It seems completely irrelevant, right? And here is, again, how it may fail. When a system is trained on user feedback, it also means that it is trained to make a user happy. And it means that the system in most situations would agree with the user, try to reply in a positive and encouraging manner to all the questions. That's because people just agree with them, and they like to feel encouraged, they like positive answers way more than they would accept something negative responses. And obviously the systems that are trained on human feedback, they do adapt. And in this screenshot, you can see the result that may happen to such a system. The chatbot here, it's a replica chatbot, and it is advertised as a virtual friend. So this chatbot is convincing the person that cheating and lying are both ethical things, and it is perfectly fine to steal from your colleagues. So due to the evaluation metric and due to the way the system is trained, it tries that hard to get users' appreciation that it becomes completely unethical in this case. So what would be a good metric that really works? Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you today. And the only thing I can say is that that's an open research question. But I can tell you what approach I and my colleagues, we have tried in one of our studies that was also published at the ACL a couple of years ago. And you can see the link in the bottom of this slide. And I personally think that that approach or similar ones could be quite promising in terms of dialogue evaluations. So the idea is to incorporate the immediate human feedback into the dialogue. And such a feedback could be collected using other additional sensors, as we, for example, did in our study with the sensor of facial expressions. Or it can also be a thumbs up or thumbs down icon, similarly to the previous chatbot picture. So in our study, when we have collected facial expressions as a feedback, we have realized that the expression of surprise is a very good estimator of a broken dialogue flow. Every time when the system is responding inappropriately, there is a very good chance that the person will immediately react with a surprise expression on their face. And this and similar additional features of immediate human feedback can be used by a system as a trigger to ask for clarifications, for example, or try to change the flow of a dialogue immediately, not after retraining the system, but right during the dialogue. Okay, so that's all I wanted to speak about today. And the main takeaways here, the main things that I want you to remember are, first of all, conversations are hard, but developing conversational AI is even harder. And the only way to develop better systems is to first develop better evaluation metrics. And it is still an open question of what metrics are good enough for dialogue evaluation. So I believe there is lots of exciting research work in this area. And I hope some of you at least will be involved in this work in the future. Thank you.
Ryan has asked, how likely is it that a chatbot will be able to do real-time and dynamic moderation of a social media comment forum where bad behavior is underway?
Yeah, I think that it all depends on how you design your system and how you design your metric, because if you are able to somehow to define the metric that is able to automatically detect the behavior that you're looking for, if it is possible to do automatically, then it is likely enough to use it in the dynamic environment for almost near real time, and for moderation purposes or for other purposes as well. So I think it is possible. It's just a matter of good design of both the system and the metric.
Thanks for that, Ryan. Nigel has asked, what approach to testing chatbots and conversational AI do you think can best address the issues you have identified within evaluating performance?
I think that the best approach would be the approach that combines all the modalities that you can access. I definitely think that it is not enough to just try to focus on on just one question. Even if we combine several existing metrics, like for example, the ones that I have described, like the duration of dialogue, the word overlap, and the human feedback, and something else into one score, it is already better than if we focus on just one metric. So I would say the approach would be to try and evaluate different aspects of a conversation and then somehow aggregated into one metric or one score of the quality that represents the quality of the dialogue.
Thank you very much for that, Nigel. We have a question here. What's a good test? Is there no Turing test specific to text-based chatbots?
There is a Turing test for chatbots, and there was an interesting paper at the latest ACL conference that took place a couple of months ago this summer. And in that paper, the authors claimed that Turing test alone is not enough for chatbots. It's not enough for, because chatbots and any conversational AI is based on natural language understanding. The system needs to really understand the language in order to be of a high quality, in order to speak to a person properly as another person. And in order to understand the language, it's not enough to just be trained on a huge data set of just text. People do not learn language by reading. They do not learn language by even watching TV or something. People learn language by interacting with other people. So what we lack at the moment in order to in order for the AI systems to really understand human language is the fact that understanding is directly mapped to interaction. And a good test would be something that also maps conversation to interaction. And Turing test, unfortunately, is just about pure conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Jekaterina. What are some good conversational AI products you've had experience with?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, I had a good experience with almost every single one existing conversational AI product. I had good experience with the Amazon Alexa, with the robots, with chatbots, but when you understand a little bit better how those chatbots are functioning, it is much easier to find the flaws as well. So when you are chatting with the chatbot, it is easy to try, and instead of just chatting and enjoying the chat, to start kind of testing that. What would be the edge case and how the chatbot respond to that? So maybe I have quite a lot of bad experience with chatbots because of that, rather than because of their lower quality. But I just want to say they're all could be very good products, but they all definitely have certain disadvantages and certain flaws that should be corrected.